so you left off with us finishing up the OEM Audio Plus install. We're left with all of our door panels that we didn't put back on because we're planning on painting these black. There is one more panel inside of the vehicle above the glove box on the passenger side that is also this color. We'll remove that last. But basically we're going to be separating the door from this brown caramel colored panel so we can paint it. You can mask this off with some tape and maybe use some business cards or something and stick it in the crack here. But we're gonna opt to remove the whole thing so we can get nice even coverage with our SEM dye paint. So let's get into the install. Alright, so to get started, I'm going to point out a few things that we're going to be removing on a door panel. This basically is the same for all the door panels, including the rear. So you're just going to pretty much mimic what I'm, kind of explaining here for all of your door panels. Basically, you have 3 T20 Torx screws, one at all the corners, and then a bunch of, it's almost like plastic rivets that are melted on there. We'll have to cut these off with a razor blade or flush cuts, and then 2 clips or snaps that kind of snap in. It looks like an H here. So once we cut all of these off and remove our 3 T20 Torx, we'll be able to just snap this panel off with these last 2 remaining clips here. Then we'll have our piece ready to paint, and we'll replicate that on the rest of the doors, and we'll be ready to go. All right, so I'm going to start with cutting these plastic melted rivets off, and you can just come in there and cut that right off. If you have some flush cuts that are big enough to go over the whole thing, you can also use a flush cut. To re-affix these after we're done painting our panel, I'm going to use some plastic welder. You can use super glue, you can use hot glue. I think epoxy is going to work much better than both of those options, so that's what I'm using. But basically you want to cut all of the white plastic melted rivets that are surrounding this panel that we're removing, as well as remove the 3 Torx screws. And again, those are T20. All right, once you have them all kind of free, just kind of push them through their holes and they should pop out of there. There we go. And if this piece of weather stripping comes up, it's just held in with some metal tabs. You can kind of straighten those metal tabs and put it back in there. Just like that, and just fold over. All right, but that's what we want. We have everything removed and ready to paint. We'll just do this for the rest of the doors, and we'll have all of our door panels ready to paint. All right, now that we got all of our interior panels removed, we're ready to move into the truck and pull off our airbag cover, which is also this caramel color. Now on the back of your panels, if you get confused with them, they are individually labeled. They only go back on the door one way anyway, but they are labeled on the back side. It does say left hand or right hand. All right, before we go ahead and prep our door panel inserts that we removed, we have this last piece that we have to take off of our glove, of our airbox, right above our glove box. In order to remove this, you got to pull all of this stuff off because there's one screw under here that we have to get to. So where I'm going to start is on the side here, this panel. Get a panel tool. And this thing will pop out and pull back. All right, and this panel here, we can just pull to the rear. And that'll pop that out. There's just some clips holding that on. All right, and that'll expose two 10mm bolts right on the right side of this lower knee bolster airbag. We'll have to pull those out. Oops, don't lose it. All right, then we got another 10mm bolt on the left-hand side of your airbag. You can pull that out. And now it's just a bunch of clips on the top. We can actually pull our airbag right out of there. There we go. And you don't have to unplug it. You can let that hang out of the way. All right, once you got the airbag off, it'll give us access to the single Phillips screw on the left-hand side here. We'll have to pull that one out. And then you can drop your glove box down, and we have two more in here. There's one on the left side and one in the center. We'll pull those out. All right, moving over to the right side of the glove box, you got this screw up here and this screw way down here at the bottom here. All right, and then this last screw here, this is actually what's holding on the edge of this panel. All right, once you pull this out, you'll be able to snap your glove box right out of there. You can see that our panel here was actually being overlapped with our glove box. So we did all of that just for that one screw there. And then on the top left here, this is why we left our radio bezel off, because of this one last screw right here. We'll pull this off, and from here we can take our panel, and it's just held in with retaining clips. We can pull this straight off. You may have to pull your climate control back a little bit to clear that bottom edge. But now we have all of our caramel colored panels removed. We can go over there to our prep table and get these ready for paint. All right, so I set up a makeshift table here with all of our panels from our Tacoma here laid out. What we have to do is try to clean these best as we can to get any kind of grease, dirt, debris, or if you have interior detail like the spray on here, Armor All, we need to get all that stuff off. So what I do recommend is you get a light water and Dawn dish soap mixture. You kind of give this a good cleaning, scrub it off and everything, and let it dry completely before you move on to this step. These panels are fairly clean, so we're just going to go ahead and use our vinyl prep that we got from SEM. And this stuff, you'll just need a microfiber cloth, and I also have a gray scuff pad. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this onto our vinyl here and try to get it as clean as possible. So as you can see, it's kind of a wet spray that comes out of there. It's not like paint, more like a cleaning solution. And I'm going to scuff up anywhere there's kind of bends and curves all around the edges. I'm going to clean up with the scuff pad before I wipe it off with the microfiber. And what that's going to do is hopefully aid in adhesion to our paint when we go to apply our paint on here. But basically you want to clean it off as good as you can. And also we're doing this in a pretty well ventilated shop. I wouldn't recommend doing this inside the house. All right, now that we got our panels all cleaned up, what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna spray some adhesive promoter on the edges. So all these edges around here, I'm gonna just shoot it up a little bit with some adhesive promoter. That's gonna get the vinyl basically really sticky for our paint. So it's gonna help it adhere to all of these edges because the last thing I wanna do is do all of this work and then have the paint start to flake or chip or something come off of this panel down the line. So that's what the adhesive promoter is for. But before I start to spray that, I'm actually gonna wear my mask and open the bay door up a little bit just to get a little bit more ventilation. So after I spray it with some adhesive promoter, then it's gonna be ready for our color coat or our SEM paint. And basically with the paint, we're gonna do 3 coats. The first coat is the lightest or the quickest. They say 10 minutes between coats and 6 to 8 inches for the distance for the coats. When you do a light coat, it's basically the speed in which you're going over the surface that you're painting. Some people think light coats are farther away and heavy coats are closer, when it's actually they're all the same distance. A light coat would just be quicker, a heavier coat would be slower, but same distance, you're just putting more paint down. But the light coat is gonna give us kind of a faded, not covered look, and you're gonna wanna wait 8 to 10 minutes for your second coat. The second coat will be a little bit heavier and you're gonna get a little bit more coverage, almost full coverage, and the third coat is gonna basically saturate the whole thing. It's gonna look completely black at that point. That's the goal anyway. So let's get into masking up and I'll start to spray our panels here. All right, now we're gonna wait 10 minutes. 10 minutes between coats, 8 to 10 minutes. And we're doing 3 coats, first light, second kind of heavy, and then the third is gonna go over for full coverage. But it looks pretty good. I went a little light on the first one here, but this will all get sorted out in the second and third coats. All right, so now that we got our third coat on our interior panels, we're gonna let this sit overnight. Even though it dries pretty quick, we're gonna give it some time to cure, kind of soak into that material, and we'll come back tomorrow for the reinstallation. All right, so as you can see here, we're back. This is day 2. We have all of our panels fully painted. They're dry. They may not be 100% cured yet, but they're pretty much ready to be worked with without any issue. So what we're gonna do now is gonna reinstall these on our door panels. And basically, I'm gonna use a combination of adhesive and some screws to hold this back in. All right, so if you notice on the back side of the panel here, you have PP, but the PP stands for polypropylene. And that's the type of plastic that this is. You can't be too quick to run to the plastic welder because right in the instructions in bold it says it does not bond polypropylene. So we're going to use 5-minute epoxy instead of the plastic weld, just because this will bond to just about everything. All right, and as far as the screws go, I'm going to use 1/2-inch self-tapping truss head screws, basically to go back through some of the spots that we pulled those plastic welded rivets in. So basically you had 3 factory locations where screws went in. One was down here at the bottom. Right on the other side was a welded riv nut kind of thing. That's where I'm gonna go back through with the self-tapping screw. I'm gonna go right through all of that excess plastic material. If yours is broken completely through and you have nothing there, you can fill that with some epoxy and wait till that cures and then drill it back in there. But ideally, having them look like this covered over is what you want. On the top side of this panel, I'm gonna put in 3 screws. On the bottom side, I'm gonna put in 1. So each panel is gonna be exactly like this. We're gonna put in 4 screws besides the 3 factory screws, and all the remaining ends that don't have anything, that's where we're gonna put the epoxy. So basically, this same panel, we're gonna do this for all the doors. All right, so to start here, we're just gonna get our panel and snap it onto our door here. Flip this over, you can see what I'm doing. So up top and at the bottom, you have a little snap that this panel, this insert just snaps right back into our door. Now I'll install the 3 factory screws that are removed initially. And make sure not to over tighten these small factory Torx, because it's just going into plastic, you'll strip it out. That goes the same for the self-tapping screws as well. All right, we got our 3 factory screws secured in there. We'll grab our self-tapping screws and we'll put 3 right in the top. And 1 on the bottom opposite of the factory screw. All right, now we have a few of those rivet locations that have nothing. This is where we're gonna apply our adhesive, but in order to do all the door panels, I'm gonna wait till we complete the installation of all of our inserts before I apply the adhesive, so I only have to mix 1 batch and apply it 1 time. But as you can see, our panel is pretty much installed at this point, even without the adhesive. The adhesive is just a little extra security on my part that this panel is not going to jiggle around or rattle around over time. But definitely from this step, you could just put the screws in and call it a day and reinstall your door panel. But we'll move on to the next door and we'll do the same steps. All right, so basically what I did was I set up all the doors in a manner that I can quickly access all of the locations that I'm going to be applying the epoxy. Because this is 5-minute epoxy, it does set up pretty quick, so I don't want a lot of time between me mixing and applying to all the door panels. So when you mix epoxy, it's going to come out on 2 sides. And basically you're going to mix those 2 sides together and that's going to cause the reaction for it to start hardening. When you think you've got enough on there, you can pull the plunger back and put the cap back on. And typically I'll use a piece of cardboard. In this case, I'm using a piece of PVC sheet and a butter knife, plastic butter knife. And you're just going to combine the colors so it looks pretty even. And we're not going to use a whole bunch on each location, so hopefully this is enough for all of them. But from here, it's going to take a little dab. You're going to push it into that hole. And you're going to do this for all the remaining hole locations on your door panels. All right, now that we applied all of our epoxy, what I like to do is I like to leave the application tool, in this case it's a plastic knife, on the epoxy board. And once this thing dries up or hardens up, you'll actually be able to test it here instead of touching all the spots that you just applied. So once this hardens up, we'll be good to go as far as messing with the door panels. This does take 24 hours to cure, even though it's 5-minute epoxy. It hardens pretty quick, but cure time is a whole day. So we'll come back to this tomorrow to reinstall the doors. But for now, while we're waiting for this to dry, we'll go ahead and reinstall our airbag panel that doesn't need any kind of adhesives on it. All right, back in the truck here, we can go ahead and reinstall our airbag cover, or the cover that's above our glove box. We have to pull the climate control out a little bit, line up the clips, and snap that back in. And now we just need to replace the 2 screws and we'll reinstall our glove box. All right, we'll put our screw back in up here. All right, and before we put our second screw in, we'll go ahead and slap the glove box back in because the glove box actually overlaps that second screw. All right, now we can open it up and reinstall the 2 screws that are inside. Coming around to the right side, we have another screw here, and on the bottom left we have another screw here. All right, with the glove box secure, we can grab our airbag and put the airbag back on. Now on the right side of the airbag, you have this little hook kind of sticking out here. Make sure to get that hook back into the kick panel here. You got to kind of just push it in and slide it down just like that. And then our 10 mils will line up perfectly fine. If you don't do that and you screw that down, that thing's basically just gonna flatten out. But we'll snap this back into place so it holds it up there, and reinstall the 2 10 mils on this side, and there's one more on the left side. All right. Then we'll get our side panel here and snap that back into place. And the very side as well. All we have to do is replace our bezel with the new bezel for our upgraded radio. And we'll just be waiting for the doors at that point. All right, we'll simply pop on our new radio bezel, and it just installs just like the factory one came out. All right, and that completes the dash reassembly. Now we're just waiting on the doors. We'll let that cure and reinstall those tomorrow. All right, so we let our doors sit for 24 hours. Our epoxy is all cured up and ready to go. Now we're ready to reinstall it on our Tacoma. All right, we went ahead and made sure that we got all of our clips out of the door before we go to install it. And also this would be a good time to install any kind of sound deadening if you wanted to do that. Give your vehicle a little bit more comfortable ride. That also improves the sound of whatever speakers that you put in there. So like we did the OEM Audio Plus, if we were to do sound deadening in here, that would also bring out those speakers a little bit better. All right, we'll bring our door panel up and we'll reattach our lock and handle cables. The white cable again is for the lock, and you can test that by moving it in and out. So I'll put that in the little hole for it and clip it in, and do the same thing for the handle. All right, we'll set our door down, got our wires through, holes are lined up. Now we'll just clip it back in place. Now we can reattach our window control module here. Plug our plugs back in. Snap that guy back in. And up top, you got your pin. There you go. Then you have the 2 screws that go on your door. The fatter of the 2 screws goes down into the door handle here. Then we can put our felt cover back down here. There you go. And the smaller screw goes into the handle, the door handle itself. And now we can clip our plastic cover back in place. And if you removed all your doors at the same time like we did, just make a note, the ones that are on the left hand side, they're all the same. So it doesn't matter if you have the front or rear door, as long as it's for the left side of the vehicle, it'll fit and it'll pop right in place. All right, we'll put our door triangle back on. Clip that back into place. All right, now we're ready to do the same steps on all 3 remaining doors. All right, that wraps up this little install of our interior panels here, giving you a little tutorial of how we change the color of our interior panels. As you can see, it makes quite a dramatic color change from that caramel to the black. They offer a whole bunch of different colors. SEM Color Code is their name. They have reds, blues, any kind of color that you want to change your interior to, they got you covered. So hope you enjoyed this tutorial that we did for you. For more videos like this, come back to Infotainment.com.